So last week we talked about the cause. Last week we went into the theories. I introduced two main theories, right? The Erikson stage model. I also introduced the other theory called Shay's cognition theory. Right? These two are the main theories in the field of geropsychology. Right? There are obviously other theories, not as established, not as well known, which you will come across in the class, right, as we go on. Last week we also talked about methodological challenges. If you recall, right, we said that longitudinal studies could do quite a bit of wonder to research in geropsychology. Right? We said that there are shortcomings to cross-sectional studies, and I would expect you to know what these shortcomings are. Right? And so we say the longitudinal studies could be done, but with certain guidelines. We also said that there are two main effects. Now, who can recall those two main effects we're interested in? Which are different. We say we're interested in age effects. We're also interested in that's right, cohort effects. Right? These two are different things. I hope you remember what the differences are. Alright? Both of them, however, are related to what we call aging. Right? The aging phenomenon has an age effect to it as well as a cohort effect to it. Right? We talked about that last week. Then we went on to the what we call applications, the various psychosocial applications. Right? We talked about work situation, health and healthcare situation. Right? I think I talked a little bit about education, not much. Right? And there's this idea of informal caregiving that might become the mainstay in years to come. It has become a mainstay in the United States and in OECD countries. You can Google that up, OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperative and Development. You will see that these developed countries are now grappling with the need to have sustainable care, out of which formal or paid healthcare could not solve. That's why we're looking for informal caregiving. Is a topic that we will do later half of this semester. So that was last week. We obviously discussed, and if you recall how we started, it was me asking you to Google and then write on Microsoft Word what geropsychology is, right? And then you found different definitions, right? So in today's slides, which I already uploaded 2 days ago, you will find the three main definitions. Right? I won't go through them. You have probably read them, right, last week on the slides, and you find that the slant or the weight of the definition of geropsychology is very much the professional, the doing, right? The exercise or the practice of helping an older person. There is a less salient component, but nevertheless important component of what we call research. Right? That means breaking new ground with knowledge, which is also what geropsychology is. The knowledge of the psychology of aging. That is not so much described or stated in those definitions. Of course, you may argue differently, you may beg to differ, which is fine. Right? That's my observation. You can read those definitions. Know where the sources of these definitions are. Right? APA and the two encyclopedias, right? You saw the sources. So that's what is here today. So these are the three definitions. Okay, I'd like to emphasize, as in all psychology classes, you would see that we always learn theory, we always learn phenomenon. This is not just for geropsychology, right? For criminal psychology, industrial organizational, developmental, and so on, you'll be exposed to a bunch of theories, psychosocial theories, biological, behavioral, so on and so forth. And then you'll be exposed to a bunch of phenomena. In geropsychology, right, largely speaking, we're saying aging effects. But what really are they? Divided into sort of two parts, the age effect and cohort. But what really are the age effects? Right, last week we saw cognition, right, according to Shay's model, right, the way information is processed, right, that could be a phenomenon. For instance, the processing of information for the purposes of reintegration, for the purposes of justifying one's attainment or achievement. Recall in that model, right? So those are phenomena. right? So N-O-N, phenomenon is one occurrence, phenomenal, and it has plural for phenomenon, right? So we always say theory explains phenomenon, theory predicts phenomenon, theory tries to control for phenomenon, and then when we do research, when we conduct research, we try to see if the phenomenon is supported by theory, or actually whether a phenomenon refutes the theory. For instance, using Shay's theory of cognition, right? If we say look in the young old category, we find that these people do not really process information for the purposes of executive function, executive reasoning, right? For the purposes of even say achievement. But if let's say we find that the information is processed for other reasons, for other purposes, that might be a piece of research to say, look, Shay's theory may not be supported in that regard. So I'd like you to understand the logic here, right? I'm just using Shay's theory as an example. Theory predicts phenomenon, from phenomenon, given research will either support or refute the theory. Okay? Alright? This is just recap, right? I believe you would have been exposed to this in the prerequisite courses, 61,000, 1100, and so on. Yeah? Questions? Okay, let's move. Alright, so today's topic, two topics really centered on cognitive aging. The first one is on sex hormones, and the other one you see cognitive/physical aging. Let's have a look at this video. Here we go. Okay, hang on. Then the sound of the video. Okay, that's good. I'd like you to, as you read this, as you view this video clip, how long? It's about 2 minutes. Identify the common understanding and meanings of menopause.
Really sorry. I know you want a baby, but I'm not really sure what to say, mainly because I'm not really sure what menopause is. Are you going to lose your hair? Shut up! She's not losing anything. This just means that from time to time, a woman's body... Can he explain it to the boy? I'm just getting some juice. Hey, Mom, maybe you should talk to Grandma about this.
Oh, that's an idea. I mean, we're just ignoramuses.
Okay. Is it like a lady parts thing?
We'll look it up in the world book.
Memorial Day, meningitis. Okay, here we go, menopause.
Good God, I didn't think you'd have pictures.
Well, this thing is the word uterus a lot.
I could have gone a whole lifetime without knowing they had a mucous membrane.
You can learn something like that, you know? Oh no, look at the symptoms. Temperamental behavior, mood swings, facial hair. Oh, Dad. I think you have menopause.
we know that there is this phenomenon called menopause. And right, you could see that in this diagram that you could see that the center one, right, kind of the median age for menopause is about 51 to 52 years old. Not everybody experiences that at that age, but a median. Right? So a common myth really is that once you hit 50 or 51 or 52, that's it, you're gone. I mean for women, right? You're gone in terms of sexual function, you're gone in terms of sexuality, you're gone in fact even in terms of sexual desire. That may or may not be true. Right? There isn't a one-size-fits-all phenomenon. So once again, just now we said phenomenal theory, right? So menopause is a biological phenomenon, right? The loss of sexual desire or the experience of less or lower sexual desire or libido, that's a psychological phenomenon. Whether or not it can be explained or predicted or controlled by theory, that is for research to find out. Okay? This is an example. Right, so that's the center one. So at the left side, you see that menopause, before menopause is called peri, and after menopause is called post. It's really much of the symptoms really happen kind of around the age of 45 to 55, if you take 50 or 51 as a median age. Right? So what we are saying is women undergo these experiences during around that age, before which and after which they may not experience so many of these, you can say symptoms. Right? So what are the symptoms? Right? One of the most common one is what we call hot flushes. Sudden kind of feelings of just warmness or hotness, even in a cold or cool environment. Right? On the right, we see that not only women go through something like that, right? There is a term called andropause that men go through. I don't know if you have actually heard of this term before coming to class, before you saw the slides. Right? Many people do not understand, may not even know that there is such a term. Right? That has to do with the decline in the testosterone levels of men. And that is what we call normal decline. Right? And that is called andropause, because we know testosterone, right, is related to certain behaviors, right, from biological psychology, like you know. Okay, so a man who undergoes that would find himself slowly, you can see that on the diagram on the right, the decline is much slower, it's more gradual than the red line. The red color or the pink, orange color kind of sharper, right? So you see that women kind of feel it and report those symptoms kind of more frequently and perhaps more sensitively than men do. But it's not true that men do not undergo any bodily or physical changes. Right? They do. So that is something I like us to understand, that both women and men experience age-related biological effects. And these are the two respective names for them. Those are made responsible for by essentially estrogen for women and testosterone for men. Okay? That's the main point. Okay. So we know that menstrual cycle has two stages, right? We learned that in applied science or biology. So I don't have to teach that, right? This is what you find in the biological textbook, right? Like the 4 phases, 2 of which we are most interested in for the purposes of studying geropsychology will be number 2 and number 4, the follicular phase and the luteal phase, right? So you will find that in the follicular phase, that's sort of right after the discharge of the blood occurs, right? And you will find that in the luteal phase is just before the discharge of blood occurs, right? Now, why is this important? It is because, as you could read from the textbook, I'm just summarizing 3 main studies here, that there seems to be some findings, however inconsistent as they are, right, between the menstrual cycle, i.e. the discharge and the discharge of blood before and after, right, regarding cognition or cognitive ability. So the first one by Letzer and Collins, 2011, you find that verbal numerical processing seems to be affected, higher rates, so better. Right? However, no, in fact, higher error rates, so and higher error rates in spatial numerical processing. So it's almost like saying, look, according to Pfizer and Ledger and colleagues, that numerical processing, right, is negatively affected. One in the follicular phase, the first one, the second one in the luteal phase. Now, how about the other research? In 2002, Mackey and colleagues found that women perform better on tasks of verbal fluency and motor skills. These are cognitive skills here. Okay. During the ML or the mid-luteal phase, as compared to the early follicular phase. However, they found no menstrual effects menstrual cycle effects on memory recall tasks. So you can see now the findings beginning to be a bit mixed. Now, then in 2008, the published finding by Monoside and colleagues was that verbal fluency, verbal spatial, and visual spatial memory, 3D visual spatial abilities and attention, right, had no changes before and after the discharge of menstrual blood. Right? No differences between the two phases, follicular and luteal in women. So what we want to say now is that research at this point seems to be mixed. There isn't a consistent finding. Why is that important? Why is that important? It's important for at least one thing, that there isn't, once again, what I said earlier, a one-size-fits-all. That women who go through menopause will necessarily have higher error rates, make more errors when it comes to numerical processing. Will do worse than a person who is before or after menopause when it comes to a numerical task. When it comes to mathematics exams, statistics exams, for example. Not necessarily true. Right? That's, I think, the main idea. Right? There isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. Now that is interesting because if you think about it, there are many psychological phenomena, right, that we say have individual differences, right? You understand that, right? We know that individual differences, environmental differences play a part in many psychological phenomena. Right? However, we also say, if we call it developmental psychology, there is usually what we call a biological predisposition, right, to a certain experience. Okay? Now, what we are saying here is, in research like that, we may not even be able to say, right, that there is a biological predisposition. Okay? We may not even be able to say that. That's one. The second thing is this. What do we know about the methodologies of such research? Now, you could look it up in the textbook. The textbook will include the original source studies, and you will find that such studies are necessarily, due to practical and ethical reasons, observational or correlational in nature. Think about it. Could you experimentally conduct a before and after to test the effect of menstrual cycle? Think about it. Would that be ethical? If so, would that be practical? Usually the answer is not really. That means I cannot randomly assign you to a group and say, look, you will discharge after 28 days. Menstrual cycle, you go through this group. In that group, you will not. I cannot do that because I don't have the means to do that. Even if I do, it is not right. Unless, right? So now, without what we call clinical trial, experimental study, therefore, could we, how much or to what extent could we really say that, right, the menstrual cycle really plays a part, really influences, really has an effect on these cognitive skills or cognitive abilities? That is something for us to think about. That is debatable. And that is why we say until today there is inconsistent finding. One, for what they could do, for what the researchers would do their best in, findings were inconsistent. Two, even when in these big studies, methodological challenges exist. Let's move on. Alright, so Dunt and colleagues found facial emotional recognition performance, right? Differences. So better performance during the follicular phase and compared to the luteal. That's what they found. So there's neural activity. There's also been other studies related to affect. You can say mood, a general sense of well-being, right? Then there is actually no difference. Affect, depression, levels of depression, mood, whether you are in a high estrogen phase or low estrogen phase, not much difference. Although women continue to report these in different clinics, right? We know that. Okay, and just now we talked about the assessment issues, right? And the cognitive and affective domains assessed, correct? This is another thing here. What is a cognitive domain? So you know that visual spatial processing is one, right? Then you have memory, right? You know that there are different types of memory. So there's a working memory, right? Then you have the semantic memory and episodic memory, right? Then for cognition, obviously you have attention, right? Now under long-term memory, you have capacity, for instance. I mean, these are things that I guess we should already know from cognitive psychology. Okay, now what domains are assessed? Even these are not consistent. So some researchers will assess some domains but not others. There isn't a one-size-fits-all to say for all cognitive or most cognitive domains, women perform better during luteal or during follicular. There isn't one-size-fits-all solution. I mean, research. Same thing for affect, right? As we know, affect has to do with say higher mood, low mood, higher perceived well-being, perceived not so well, and so on. Once again, no consistent finding. Alright. So, one of the things that women undergo when these symptoms seem to be unbearable, right, is what we call HT, hormone therapy, menopausal hormone therapy. Right? Now, this kind of therapy has been subjected to what we call randomized control trials or RCT. Right? That is what we call an experiment or experimental study, where women are given first the therapy, and then the other group are given the therapy later. So they wait and they're given later. Right? In fact, everybody is given therapy, just whether they're given then or later. Why not? No therapy? Because it's considered unethical, simply in RCT. So usually in RCT, even when you test a drug, or say in COVID-19, the vaccination trials, it's the same thing. You're given that something, right? And that group will be given something else. Given that something, but later. Right? Obviously, provided that the first group will have reported any adverse effects, side effects, and so on, those will be added. So that's what RCT does. So we find that in hormone therapy, the provision or the non-provision of which has been studied, right? What else? Surgical menopause, right? That's another one where women voluntarily elect to go through menopause at a certain age. That is earlier than what they would otherwise go through. Okay, due to different health reasons. And then observational studies are ones in which they rely on reports by these different women on their menopausal peri, right, and during and after, right, those experiences that they report, both in the clinic as well as in the community. Right, so these are the various types of research that has been done, and we say that even across these different types of research, still we don't find consistent findings, as you saw earlier. Okay. Alright. These two, the WIMS and the WISCA, are really two main studies, landmark studies if you like, on menopause and cognition. Right? Menopause and cognition. Now I'd like to give us, say, 5 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe yeah, that's I'd like each table to choose one, just choose one, either the wings or the whisk guard. I like you to find the methodology from the textbook and the main findings. Right? Write them down somewhere. Later on, one person from that group, that table, just say out. In a few statements, you do. No need a long score. Right? Methodology, I refer to how was the study conducted. So they find how many women, put them through what kind of condition, 2 groups or 3 groups, across how many different sites or what duration of time and so on. That's methodology. Main findings could be effect or effect or what. Basically, that's the main. Right, let's do that in the next, say, 5 to 7 minutes. So choose one between the two. You could first go to the textbook, or if you would like, you can, okay, I haven't given you these URLs, you can type this in on your computer. These are places where, in fact, you could go to, I'll give you the slides after this, right, to in fact find the main findings and methodology of the URL outcomes. Right, go ahead. Anybody having difficulty? Okay, let's wrap up in the say next 30 to 60 seconds. Okay. Alright. Let me just see a show of hands, which table actually chose wings. Okay, thank you. Which one chose whisker? Whisker. The rest chose wings. Okay, here I think we will not go by majority, we'll go by minority first and see what you have got. Right? So just share with us whatever you have got. First the methodology, then perhaps the findings, or if you just have anyone. Go ahead. You can be brief, just be brief.
It's a clinical trial that included 2,302
results. Sorry, verbal learning and memory, right? What memory do you know? Verbal learning, that's correct. Is it specified where you are? What type of memory? That's right. These two, are there effects of these or no effects? I think you just said it. I'm going to write here, verbal and working, right? So, effects of verbal and on verbal and working memory or no effect? There is effect, right? Sorry? Poorer. Okay, do we know poorer at what stage? Or poorer due to, or poorer related to? Right, the placebo trial. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, you want to say something? Continue. What you want to say? That's right. Right, increased dementia risk. Increased dementia risk. Right. That's right. Those are the main things, right? Now, this yes, go on.
So for the core verbal learning and response is the combination of CED and NPA. CED is contributed with estrogen with hormone therapy regimen, and then NPA is very progesterone acetate.
Yes. Thank you.
And then, but to women who are randomized to CED alone, the results from the study showed no significant benefit or harm to age changes to specific cognitive functions.
That's right. Actually, age-related change, not significant, not statistically significant.
Right.
However, right, due to these two things, right, go and read your textbook, what MTA stands for and CEE, there seems to be an effect. Okay, on verbal memory and working memory. Okay. Right. Could you also tell us, could this group also tell us which group or which these had higher dementia risk? People who went through or did not go through the NPA or went through or did not go through the CEE?
For CED and NPA was a significant increase.
In dementia risk?
Yeah. For CED alone, it was still an increase, but it was not significant.
That's right. So, right, once again, CEE, there is, in fact, there is increase, there's also less. Right, there is inconsistent finding, in fact, with regards to the effect of or the influence of CEE on dementia risk. Okay. However, the effect of MTA on this dementia risk seems to be clearer, right, that there is higher for those who are exposed. Right, thank you very much. So that in fact, in this of course, there are many other details which you can read from menstrual research. Right. Thank you very much. Any other group did this graph? No, huh? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we have six kind of groups who did this. So let's have the first group tell us what they discussed, the methodology. Anyone? What was done? Okay, the group from the far east. What was done? In weeks. Anybody? Yeah. So okay, when we report a study, right, just a rule of thumb, we usually have this acronym. When you report a study and when you write in your journal, if you do, and when you write in your individual paper, right? PICOS. P for participant, I for intervention, C for comparison, O for outcome, S for setting. Need me to repeat that? Okay. P for participant, so who, what, from where, and so on. I for intervention, so what kind of hormone or what kind of injection whatsoever. C for comparison, that means, is there a comparison group, that means with therapy, without therapy, or with placebo, that's comparison. Right, outcome, that means really the main finding intended finding. And then S is setting, that means where, in what context, which country, what kind of site. So essentially, when we report a study, we look for these things. The peak cost. Okay, some people will add a P. That actually, let me do it this way. It's peak cost. So T is time. Setting is T. Right? So when? Time is also how many time points? Is it longitudinal or cross-sectional? Right. Okay. So now I have given a lot of guidance to this one. Give us at least one or two of these three cards.
So the English it was women who were from age 65 to 79, and given split into three different groups, one estrogen, one with estrogen and progesterone, and one which was placebo only.
Thank you. Three groups again. Can you say the three groups once more? Estrogen?
Estrogen together with progesterone, and then the placebo group.
Right. Estrogen plus progesterone and then placebo. Right? So three groups of participants. Thank you very much. Okay, another table. Will you carry on from there? So they have covered P and I. In fact, also C, right? A comparison. Another group, you carry on from there. O, T, or S. Yes. Right. Hang on. That's a good point. That's a finding, right? Increased dementia. Do you say risk or no risk? Dementia risk? Okay. In which group?
Women age 65 and above.
Which is all of them. You said a group. Is it the estrogen group? The with progesterone? All of them.
Yeah, except the placebo.
Except placebo. So actually two groups had at least higher risk. One group didn't. Okay? So we'll write another color. So estrogen or estrogen, and then estrogen plus progesterone. Okay? Alright? Okay, high dementia risk. Thank you very much. Okay, let's reserve. Let's give another chance. Give a chance to other groups. Yes, other table. Yes. Another finding? Yes, all setting up. Verbal and cognitive function. That's right. Global, right? But in which group? Or in which type of participants? You can write it down if you want. Essentially three groups here: estrogen group, estrogen plus progesterone, and placebo. That means the fake one, the fake group, given the fake drug. Okay, another group want to help them? Yes. Say your first few words. What is associated? Right? Global cognitive function. Yes, I call that. Poorer global cognitive function associated with which group or groups? Right? So this group, right? Estrogen plus. Yes? Now other people who research or who read out on whims, do you agree? Was it really just this group? Let's do fact check here. It's just a fact whether yes or no. Or other groups are also experience poorer global cognitive function. Let's just check. Okay, so yes, just raise your hand. Yes, only this group. Other groups, other people who did? No? Raise your hand. Okay, so I guess no. Alright, so yes. Okay, I can't get it. Is it just the estrogen? Okay, where do you get that from? Only the estrogen. Right? Only the estrogen group, right? Not the estrogen plus progesterone.
So the estrogen plus progesterone seems like it's only about the higher dementia, but then in terms of global cognitive ability and the estrogen.
That's right. Thank you very much. That's what I get. Right? That's right. the experiences for a global cognitive function. Okay? I mean, by the way, you know how to do the statistics on this, right? Just do a one-way ANOVA, right? For experimental trials or what about RCTs, the statistics are easy. Essentially, ANOVA and things like that. For longitudinal studies or correlational data where there's no experiment, it's much harder. Okay, thank you very much for the contribution from here. Okay, there are other tables who have contributed. Something else that we can benefit from is other tables here and there. Yeah. Regarding the wings. Okay, setting. Can somebody tell us about the setting? Where? I know it's in the US, but where? Is it a hospital? Clinics? Community? Where? This table. Yes, where?
Until 2008, was their one degree. Then after that, they were administered assessment.
Right. Okay, I didn't quite get. I got 2008, but where? I didn't catch that. WHI clinic, right? Okay, and what is WHI clinic? Right, so these are clinics, right? Okay, so these participants were recruited from these clinics. Okay, alright, so that tells us the setting. Right, what state did they say in the US? Or which cities? How about demographics like, I mean we know the age, but how about things like, say, ethnicity or race? Do you have any information on that? Educational level, anything to do with demographics, socio-demographics? Okay. No information on that. Okay. You said 2008, that's correct. Now, who knows for how long was this study conducted? The WIMS. I heard something there.
6 years.
6 years? Was it longitudinal? Is that a yes or no answer? Yes or no? Okay, hands up, yes, it's longitudinal, hands up. Thank you very much. Hands up, no, WIMS was not longitudinal. Good, that's right, it was longitudinal now. So the question for the class now, everybody. How could a longitudinal study be conducted when we also did experiments? Right, this experiment, 3 groups. We said it's 3 groups, so obviously each group went through one of the condition. You cannot say you are a member of both the exclusion as well as the placebo, right? Cannot, right? It's between subject design, yes? Okay, you know what I'm talking about, right? Research design, right? Between subject design. Okay, in that case, usually one cross-sectional time one will do, right? How is it took 6 years? Very good. Okay, maybe give a chance in this case. Ideas? No ideas. How is it that a cross-sectional experiment, or an experiment that actually could be done in one go, one sitting or one setting, so to speak, took 6 years? Yes.
It takes time to test it. So after the therapy, you still come back.
Yes, that's right. Very good. Many of our what we call effects in geropsychology may or may not take time to materialize. Right? So these women, right, when they are exposed to this, say, this group, the estrogen group, we put in this estrogen plus group or the placebo group, right, were asked on, were tested on, were asked on their experiences / symptoms, if you like, right, at several time points thereafter. Right? I thought this is an important point because often we think an experiment, a randomized controlled trial, RCT, that's happening at one time point, that's it, finished, right? Go home. Right? Participants get paid the money incentive, right? Some of you might even have joined such trials, I don't know if you have. Right? But in aging, in geropsychology or gerontology, we find that follow-up is required. Much as there is what we call experimental manipulation, right? At some time point, usually near the beginning, there will be follow-up, usually. That's the first thing that why it took 6 years or more to study like that. Another reason, possibly, is that recruitment couldn't be practically done for senior 65 at one shot. So let's say, how many participants again? Someone will get 2,000 and something. 270 for wings. 7,000. Okay, that's 7,000 plus. Right? It's almost impractical to be able to recruit. Improbable to be able to recruit 7,000 per job. So recruitment takes place, and as we recruit, we cannot say wait until I get all 7,000 then let's start the trial. Right? You recruit, then you begin, and then follow up. But as you go on to the next part, which is the beginning and follow up, you recruit new people and go through that process. And as you do the next batch, the third batch is done, and so on and so forth. This is why it takes a long time. Right? So I'd like you to think about this now. Will you consider this a longitudinal study or a cross-sectional study? Now, I won't discuss this here. We can reflect on this in the future. Will you consider this a research like this a longitudinal or a cross-sectional study? That's the one thing to think about. The second thing is, would this kind of design, like the wings, right, be a research design that takes care of the problems, the methodological problems or issues that we discussed last week? Before we discuss about the problems of cross-sectional, problems of longitudinal, right? Okay, something for us to reflect. Questions before we move on? Thank you for your contribution. Let's move on. Okay. Okay, back to menopause, you can read that. Okay, so andropause, I only have, I think, one slide of it. Right? The idea that testosterone, what we call circulating levels of testosterone, actually affects cognition, right? That has been found, right? And some men, older men, actually take supplement, testosterone supplement, right, to ease the symptoms of andropause, right? So we know what some of the symptoms are like. Lower libido, less strength, impaired sleep, for instance. Right? So that's experienced by some men. It's very gradual, right? People may not even report it, as part of it. Okay, so that's andropause. Note that word andropause. Okay, so in conclusion on this topic really is that age-related declines in sex steroid levels may not be found in our study. Some say yes, there are declines, some say no. Right? Some say there's age-related, age-related, some say no. That's one. HT, hormone therapy, should not be initiated in older postmenopausal women like age 65 and above due to the risk involved. That is beginning to be clear. Short-term use of HT may pose little risk. Now, in the past, people may think that HT, hormone therapy, pose risk. People only go for it or opt for it when the experiences or the symptoms are unbearable. So research has found that to be not true, neither is not. Right? What is not yet understood is the fourth point there. Are there cognitive effects of testosterone supplements? So we know that testosterone supplements could help a person regain regain some libido or some sex drive. It could help a person regain some energy if an older man experiences that. But does that impact, say, working men? Does that impact global? Right? Does that have any effect, whether risk or beneficial effect on dementia? That remains to be seen. Alright, let's quickly go on now to the next topic on gene environment interplay. Right, there are three parts in this chapter, and really the main part is the last section there, the interplay part. So I just go quickly over the cognitive function here. Right? Research has found that yes, with age comes sort of a general decline in cognitive ability, right? The various cognitive functions generally, right? And research has often used longitudinal twin studies, whether what we call identical or non-identical twins, right? To establish this, right? Here I write that their declines in heritability increases in environmental influences in late adulthood. That means to say that it seems like a person, a human being, might be more affected by or influenced by hereditary genes, things that are passed down from his predecessors at the earlier stages of life than the later stages of life. So as one progresses on to what we call mid or even late adulthood, and then in the late we have the young old, middle old, and the old old. As we go further and further away from birth, right, the effects of heritability decreases. That's one thing. Right. Now, so that's general. How about specific cognitive abilities? So brain imaging studies have found that relevant composition of cognitive functioning could be tested. Right? It can be tested by brain imaging studies. Now, what does that mean? That means we can say, look, we subject a person to a certain task, like a visual spatial task or attention task. Test him or her whether or not, how fast he will react to a certain stimulus. When you see a yellow color, press this button. When you see a red color, press that button. You know, I don't know if you have gone through research participation yourself, those cognitive tasks. So they could do this. And then, of course, what they do is they connect the head to different machines, right? So they could do brain imaging. We want to note that brain imaging studies, right, and one of them would be fMRI, there's a course on that right now, are necessarily non-experimental. They have to be by design cross-sectional observational, but simply because it's unethical, impossible, impractical to manipulate your brain. Yes? Okay, so I want you to take note of that. Next one, there is now a growing field called behavioral genetics that tries to find common genetic factors, right, responsible for specific cognitive abilities in older adults. Genetic influences specific to individual executive functions, right, have been found where specific cognitive abilities are concerned. Let's move on from there. Right. Research has also found that education, socioeconomic status, occupational complexity, and even lung function, right, to be factors for the performance of cognitive tasks and decline in older age. Now we know that these four things that are listed there, or at least the first three of them, right, could largely be said to be environmental than biological. Now, physical function. Research has focused on three things: the BMI, the effect of BMI, or the association between BMI and cognitive function. Research has also focused on blood pressure's effect on physiological function and lung function on physiological function. Right? We found that normal BMI seems to be beneficial, even in older age, largely speaking. And it does seem like, once again, under blood pressure, you see the same similar result, decreasing genetic influence. Earlier on, we said there's a less heritability, right? So it's the same idea. Here is decreasing genetic influences with increasing age. So what that means is, where blood pressure is concerned, right, as one gets older, the effects of low blood pressure or the effects of high blood pressure on physiological functioning is gets less decreased as one gets older. Lung function, moderately heritable in late adulthood. That means to say that poor lung function, a person with poor lung function could kind of pass on, right? Could kind of pass on this poor lung function to his or her offspring, and then you only kind of see the results of that later in adulthood, in mid or early adulthood. But when it comes to late adulthood, you may not see that big influence. Right? So these three kind of tells us that yes, there are biological factors, right? However, there remains a kind of a big part of the jigsaw that is unexplained biologically. Behavioral functioning, research has focused on physical strength, physical functioning, and heritability. Right? Where hereditary is concerned, right? Research found that greater susceptibility or vulnerability to chronic illnesses or chronic conditions between women and men is women. Life experiences kind of affect women more than men in terms of hereditary. Okay. Now we really want to come to this one. Genetic influences on environmental sensitivity, right? Okay. What is behavioral genetics? The study of genes that influences human behaviors. Behavioral geneticists often are interested to establish genetic factors or biomarkers that affect human behaviors. Right? Some have even gone as far as to say that certain genes are responsible for crime commission, for sexuality, say homosexuality. Right? So there seems to be, however, more recent research that there is this what we call person-specific environment. That means in a certain environment, this person, a certain type of person might be more affected than another. That's what it is. Okay. Models of genetic influences. There are two models or two theories there: diathesis stress model and the differential susceptibility theory of models. Both of which seems to tries to explain, right, the influences of genetic of genes on human behaviors. Where biomarkers are concerned, we want to focus on, or research has focused on epigenetic processes and what we call methylation, DNA sequence variation. Be sure to read up on what that is. Research has focused on those two, or whether or not there are effects of epigenetic processes, right, on a person's physical and cognitive function, and whether or not there's an effect of methylation on a person's cognitive/physical function. That's one thing. Second thing, research has also found that telomere length, okay, telomere length, which is being brought about by age, education, stress, and illness, actually affects one's physical and cognitive function. The idea that the longer the telomere, better or higher working memory performance and episodic memory performance. That has been clear in research. However, what has not been tested, the third point there, the last point there, right? What hasn't been tested are really longitudinal effects. So we are unable to say over time that telomere length, right, exerts influences, right, on these two types of memory, working memory and episodic memory. Alright. So future research in biogenetics is likely to take a lifespan perspective of approach. That means to say it's likely to have, we are likely to see studies like WIMS. So you have kind of cross-sectional, expose people to different conditions, and then follow up over time. Right? It could be longer than say 6 years. Lifespan obviously is much longer than that. Likely to see that. Future research is likely to also investigate lipid and synaptic plasticity, because we now know, right, for instance, there is in neuropsychology and neuroscience, we know that the brain changes. The brain changes as a human develops, that means as we age, right? It's called neuroplasticity, right? You know that, right? So specifically the lipids, right, the function of the lipids and the synapse, the way, right, different neurons and chemicals interact with the synapse, that may change over time. Right? Research is going to focus on that. Third point, whether or not there are sex and age-dependent effects remains to be seen, then may be a room for future research. Right? And then finally, the context. When all this research is done, under what circumstances or in what situations is this older person, older adult in? Right? One example would be, say, war-torn areas. Right? In the context of war, the context of, say, a threat to human or personal safety, right? In those kind of contexts. Now we have the pandemic context. Do these effects exist? In these contexts, do age-dependent effects exist? Right? In the context of, say, a pandemic, will we see that telomere length continue to affect working memory? For instance, right? In a high-stress situation, right? Once again, take the pandemic, take say COVID-19's threat to older people as a context now. We could now think about whether or not, right, such contexts change the way the biomarkers work. So this really, in a nutshell, is what we believe to be future research that is not likely to just focus on either the biological factors or the environmental factors, but both, and how they work, right? To give rise to cognitive function, cognitive experiences in older people, as well as physical experiences. Questions on this? I think this may be one of my last slides. Questions on this one? Okay. Alright. Okay. So that really is it. I tried to, you can see that my slides are quite brief, right? I don't want to intend my slides to be replacement for the textbook. Neither are they handouts or what you call notes. You take your own notes, whether from the lecture, from my lecture here or from the textbook. Alright, these slides are just to highlight the key points. Right, I'll note them. Obviously, there are some things in the slides which aren't available here, right? 2 days ago when I uploaded them. So you will have these, right? This course is 100% CA. That means I don't need to memorize anything. I don't need to reproduce anything by heart and quiz you in some kind of an exam. Right, but I want to see that you understood the material enough to be able to make personal suggestions, be able to explain where it's explainable, and be able to say, look, where it's not explainable, what could be done. That's the aim of this course, right? In the later half of this course, I also would like to see that you could advocate. That means you could actually articulate the social need or social issue behind some of these aging phenomena. You will see that some of the topics there are necessarily psychosocial in the later half. Right? You have to call out okay? So that's what I hope that you can get out of these. There will obviously be theories that will help us explain. But you know that none of these theories in geropsychology are really foolproof, are really like set in stone. Even Shay's, like last week's Shay's cognitive or theory of cognition, that could be debated even last week. Right? So that is what I'm leaving with. Okay.